In December 1980, a 21-year-old church secretary was flown to Florida because she thought she was helping with a broadcast. She ended up in a hotel room with Jim Bakker. What happened in those 15 minutes stayed buried for years. PTL paid her $265,000 to stay quiet. The money came from donations meant for missions, and when the truth finally leaked, it didn't just end Bakker's career. It exposed $92 million in missing funds, gold-plated bathrooms, and a fraud so big it changed how America saw televangelists forever. But that was just the beginning. The story just got worse. Jim Bakker entered the world on January 2, 1940, at around 11:00 a.m. inside Mercy Hospital in Muskegon, Michigan. And his life began with a moment that left a mark on both his body and his mind. He arrived prematurely, and not long after, a malfunctioning incubator burned his tiny foot so badly that he had to remain in the hospital without his mother. She went home heartbroken while he stayed alone in that sterile room, and maybe something about that early separation never fully left him. His father, Raleigh, spent almost 50 years working as a machinist at Sealed Power Corporation, helping Detroit keep its auto industry moving. He made a steady income, and even liked driving slightly used Cadillacs. Yet Jim convinced himself they were poor. He repeated that belief until it felt real to him, even though the family moved into a former lumber-era mansion on Webster Avenue when he turned 15. The place even had a beautiful player piano, but Jim carried that sense of imagined deprivation with him, letting it shape the hunger that would later drive much of his life. That early gap between reality and the story he told himself would grow larger with time, and it would become the lens through which he shaped everything around him. Growing up in an Assemblies of God home meant rules that wrapped tightly around him. Dancing was forbidden, drinking was forbidden, and anything that seemed too worldly was treated like a danger. Yet teenage Jim found a way to satisfy his craving for attention without breaking the exact wording of his parents' rules. He became the disc jockey at high school sock hops all over Muskegon during the 1950s, talking into a microphone while the crowd danced to songs like At the Hop. He kept his feet still, stayed behind the turntable, and told himself he was not breaking the rule. As the record spun and the room moved with energy he was controlling, he felt the rush of commanding a crowd. It was a small stage, but it lit something inside him, and he learned how to hold people, how to shape their emotions, and how to lean into the power of performance. Those nights became a quiet rehearsal for what he would one day do on television, where millions hung on his every word. After graduating from Muskegon High School in 1959, he left Michigan behind and traveled to Minneapolis to enroll at North Central Bible College. It was a strict place with rigid rules that shaped everything students did, including a firm prohibition on marriage during the academic term. Jim arrived carrying another secret in his pocket. He already had a fiancée waiting for him back in Muskegon, a woman who believed he would return to her. But in 1960, his life veered sharply when he met an 18-year-old young woman named Tammy Faye LaValle. She came from a Pentecostal family in International Falls, Minnesota, and something about her lively spirit caught him instantly. On their first date, he told her he had loved her since the moment she walked into the school, and by their third date, he proposed. Tammy said yes without hesitation. She wanted love, safety, and purpose, things she had struggled to find after growing up as the eldest of 8 children in a home where her mother was shunned by the church because of divorce and remarriage. Jim never mentioned his original fiancée, and he quietly broke that engagement while building a new future with Tammy. It was the first time he realized he could weave different stories for different people and keep moving forward without facing the consequences right away. Jim worked as a busboy at a restaurant inside the Young Quinlan department store to help cover his school expenses. and Tammy worked at local shops like Three Sisters and later at Woolworth's. Together, they survived on just $80 a week in 1960 and 1961, barely enough to cover rent and food. Their hands were often tired from long shifts, and their dreams were far bigger than their wallets. The early struggle etched itself deep into Jim's memory. The boy who once cleared tables and pocketed tiny tips would later pursue wealth with a determination that bordered on obsession. Years later, he would live in a world filled with private jets, gold-plated bathroom fixtures, an air-conditioned doghouse, and a Christian theme park that swallowed millions. But the roots of that desire stretched back to those lean years when every dollar felt like a victory. When the college refused to allow their marriage, the couple did not wait. On April 1, 1961, Jim at 21 and Tammy at 19 walked away from North Central Bible College entirely and got married on a day usually known for jokes. Their expulsion followed immediately. They gave up their education without hesitation and stepped into ministry life with nothing but their determination and their untested belief that they were meant for something larger. It was an impulsive decision, and that same impulsiveness would echo through their future choices again and again. They soon took a youth ministry position in Minneapolis, yet the stability of that job couldn't contain their growing hunger for a bigger stage. They headed into the Bible Belt as itinerant evangelists, traveling from one small church to another, with Tammy singing and playing the accordion while Jim preached. Their puppet show became their signature and turned out to be the thing that changed their lives, because in 1965, someone important noticed. Pat Robertson of the Christian Broadcasting Network invited them to Portsmouth, Virginia. And when they arrived, CBN was struggling to survive. Jim and Tammy stepped into the children's show, Come On Over, filling it with puppets, songs, and bright energy that children loved. Viewers multiplied quickly. Jim discovered something powerful about television. With the right tone, the right rhythm, and the right plea, people would give. They would give money. They would give trust. And they would give their hearts. His talent for fundraising grew so fast that by 1966 he was promoted to host the 700 Club. The show had begun as a telethon begging for 700 donors at $10 a month, but Jim turned it into something far more dynamic. The success was huge, yet behind the scenes, storm clouds gathered. By 1972, CBN executives confronted him about using ministry funds for personal expenses. Pat Robertson bristled at Jim's swelling ambition, and their partnership cracked open under the pressure. When the conflict erupted, Jim and Tammy left abruptly in late 1972 and moved to Southern California. There they joined Paul and Jan Crouch to help launch Trinity Broadcasting Network in 1973. For a while, it looked like a dream partnership, with both couples bringing experience and energy. They rented airtime, bought equipment, and launched a show called Praise the Lord. But the relationship fell apart quickly as Jim and Paul clashed. Less than a year later, Jim and Tammy walked out, leaving the Crouches scrambling. That betrayal would become the first of many burned bridges. Around the same time, Jim spotted an opening in Charlotte, North Carolina. Rhett TV dropped the 700 Club, and Ted Turner offered Jim 2 hours of daily airtime. Jim moved fast. In January 1974, he launched the PTL Club out of a tiny former furniture store with just a handful of staff members. The name PTL stood for Praise the Lord or People That Love, depending on how you wanted to hear it. The show blended celebrity guests, tearful testimonies, lively music, and Jim's emotional pleas for support. Viewers latched on immediately. Money began flowing in, and within months the show grew past anyone's expectations. Jim brought his old California crew to Charlotte in February 1974, a move that left the Crouches shocked. By April 1977, PTL had become a full satellite network with broadcasts reaching across the United States. They renamed the parent company Heritage Village Church and Missionary Fellowship and began expanding their properties in Fort Mill, South Carolina. The empire grew so fast that within 3 years the Bakkers were at the center of a massive operation generating nearly $240 million annually. PTL used Heritage Village in Charlotte for uplink and editing until December 1986, when everything shifted to their much larger project, Heritage USA. By 1975, the PTL Club had gone national. The fundraising tactics became emotional to the point where critics called them tearful fundraising. Some viewers believed they were saving the ministry from collapse each time Jim cried on camera, and the donations proved it. A former employee once said the cash office held more money than he could even imagine. People mailed mink coats, diamond rings, and property deeds because they believed Jim when he said disaster would strike if their gifts didn't arrive in time. Federal investigators would later question whether these crises were real. Between 1976 and 1977, the Charlotte headquarters on Park Road became a buzzing nerve center for every PTL broadcast. The halls filled with staff, volunteers, cameras, and the constant hum of production equipment. The ministry plastered PTL bumper stickers on windows and sent out mailers across the country. The dream kept expanding until it finally reached Fort Mill, where Jim began shaping Heritage USA into a Christian fantasy land. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Heritage USA had turned into a phenomenon that rivaled major theme parks. The 2,000 to 300-acre complex drew 4.9 million visitors every year, making it the third largest resort in the United States after Walt Disney World and Disneyland. The place felt like a kingdom with a giant castle, a water park called Heritage Island, and even plans for the world's largest Wendy's restaurant. Revenue hit $126 million a year. Even Jerry Falwell shot down the 163-foot Typhoon water slide in a suit during one event. Property prices soared so high that the entire site later sold for $52 million. Behind the scenes, the finances grew darker. Viewers contributed more than $1 million every week, believing the money was building the theme park and expanding ministry programs. But federal documents later revealed that Jim used a $25,000 PTL check to buy a mink coat, bought himself a Corvette, and even purchased a houseboat with donor funds. In 1978 and 1979, he told viewers that $350,000 would help missions in South Korea and Brazil. But the money was delayed for more than a year while funds poured into Heritage USA instead. Prosecutors eventually claimed Jim cheated followers out of $150 million, with $3.7 million diverted to his own lifestyle. He sold 165,000 lifetime vacation packages at $1,000 each, even though he could not deliver what he promised. Through all this, Jim stood firm on one belief. He often said that if Jesus were alive today, he would be on TV. That line became his shield and his justification. He insisted he believed everything he said on air and blamed the ministry's downfall on overexpansion and inexperienced management rather than intentional deception. He saw television not as an optional tool, but as the future of evangelism, the place where God's message belonged. Here is your rewrite with smoother flow, simple wording, no headings, no dashes, no breaks, no comparisons, and a connected sloppy slide style. All numbers stay in digit form. It began on December 6, 1980, when 21-year-old Jessica Hahn from Massapequa thought she had been given a small blessing. She had worked before as a babysitter for traveling evangelist John Wesley Fletcher. So when he invited her to fly to Florida and help with a church broadcast, she believed it was an honor. He told her she would meet Jim Bakker, the famous televangelist whose show reached millions, and she imagined she would help at a telethon or maybe watch the production up close. She saw it as a chance to do something good, not knowing that one invitation would grow into the scandal that would later crush Bakker's $129,000 per year PTL empire. Fletcher arranged her flight and spoke to her as if she had been chosen for something special, and she trusted that feeling as she boarded the plane. When she reached Florida, nothing matched what she had been promised. Fletcher brought her to the Sheraton Sand Key Resort in Clearwater Beach instead of a studio, checked her into a room, and handed her a glass of red wine that made her feel dizzy and strange. Her attorney later said she felt drugged. Bakker was pulled from the swimming pool and brought to her room wearing a white terry cloth bathing suit, and Fletcher whispered that she should give Bakker a back rub to help him relax before the night's prayer service. Then, he left her alone. What followed lasted about 15 minutes, according to her later testimony. And when Bakker walked out, Fletcher returned and attacked her as well. At one point, he even asked Bakker in front of her how it felt and if the Lord had ministered to him. Jessica felt sick and numb and went straight to the shower, unable to understand how a moment meant to be holy had turned into something she could hardly explain. Jessica said she had been a virgin when all this happened, and that fact only deepened her confusion. She later told investigators she felt trapped because she had been raised to fear disappointing religious leaders. She said it felt like she was in the room with God and could not say no. Church gossip followed her, even though she stayed silent. Her attorney described how she suffered heavy emotional damage and felt as if someone had thrown her aside. In November 1984, she signed a document recanting her accusations, but she later said she was forced into it and was given $10,000 by a PTL board member to keep quiet. Her life twisted into fear and shame while the men who hurt her carried on with their ministries. Around the same time, another storm was forming behind closed doors. Tammy Faye Bakker had grown close to country singer Gary Paxton, the producer behind songs like Alley Oop and Monster Mash. Paxton worked long nights with her in Nashville and called her Lady Bird. Tammy flew to Nashville often, and Paxton's ex-wife later said the two kissed at least once. Jim Bakker felt his pride cracking. He called Paxton repeatedly, yelling at him, accusing him of spending nights alone with Tammy. Paxton finally snapped and told him to come to Nashville if he wanted a fight. Later, at their Palm Springs home, the Bakkers admitted Jim's encounter with Hahn had been an act of revenge meant to make Tammy jealous. After the encounter, guilt pushed Jim into dramatic gestures. He sent Tammy a single rose every day to Nashville, trying to pull her back toward him. He banned Gary Paxton from ever appearing on the Jim and Tammy show, cutting him off from a powerful Christian television audience. When Paxton wrote an 8-page letter begging forgiveness, Jim sent it back unopened. Meanwhile, Jessica Hahn stayed silent until February 1985, when she resurfaced and restated her claims. PTL quickly paid her $265,000 to keep the story buried. She received $115,000 in cash for herself and her representatives, and PTL placed another $150,000 in a trust fund that would grow for 20 years. She would collect monthly interest of $800 to $200 until 2005, when she would receive the full amount, but only if she stayed silent. The payment came from ministry funds funneled through Bakker associate Roe Messner. Jim Bakker's world kept expanding, and the scale of it hid the cracks beneath. In June 1984, he bought a 1939 Rolls-Royce, and then, that same day, purchased a burgundy and tan 1953 Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn for $55,000 using ministry money for his own pleasure. Only 761 of those cars existed, and he behaved as if the donations were his personal budget. When the PTL scandal exploded, the 1939 Rolls-Royce vanished, becoming one of the pieces of $92,000 in ministry funds that could not be accounted for. The cars later went on auction lists as PTL struggled under massive debt. People could not forget the air-conditioned doghouse. It sat in the yard at their Lake Wylie home until it was hauled to a 1987 auction, where bidders expected it to bring $2,000 or $3,000, even though it was only worth a few $100s. The doghouse actually cooled the pets. A 7-foot bronze giraffe that stood in Jim's office became another symbol of excess. These items sat beside gold-plated bathroom fixtures, antique pianos, and luxury cars as PTL's new leadership scrambled to raise $500,000 to slow the bleeding. The Bakkers lived in rooms that looked like palaces. At Heritage Grand Hotel, their presidential suite held 3 bedrooms, 2 offices, a kitchen, 2 sitting rooms, a dining room, and 7 bathrooms with 14-karat gold fixtures. Tammy's closet stretched 50 feet and lit up with cut-glass chandeliers. Their vehicle fleet grew with several Mercedes-Benzes, a 1985 Lincoln Continental, and a 1927 Franklin. Even their 1984 Mercedes 380 SL was bought with ministry perks. Utilities, cleaning staff, security, and more were paid by donors who never knew their money supported this life. Their real estate spread across the country. They owned a $148,000 chalet in Gatlinburg near the Great Smoky Mountains and poured nearly $300,000 into improvements, including a stone driveway costing $35,000 and a long private lap pool. They also owned property in Palm Springs listed at $700,000 before dropping the price to $650,000, and the large home on Lake Wylie. Builder Roe Messner, who worked on many PTL projects, was owed $300,000 for the chalet alone, and about $14,000 total for Heritage USA work. When PTL tried to reclaim ministry items from the Gatlinburg home, Bakker's side blocked them with a court order. The Bakkers moved from Palm Springs to Gatlinburg in July 1987, expecting to use the Palm Springs sale to finish paying for the Tennessee home. The numbers tied to their income stunned even investigators. From January 1984 to March 1987, Jim and Tammy collected $4,800,000 in salaries, bonuses, and payments. In 1986, they received nearly $1,600,000 and then added $640,000 more during the first 3 months of 1987 while living quietly in Palm Springs. Of that, $470,000 came as bonuses. During his 1989 trial, a prosecutor asked Jim how he could miss a $50,000 bonus. He replied that he had not looked at his checkbook for several years. The jury heard that between 1984 and 1987, the Bakkers took $3,500,000 in bonuses, even while PTL struggled with severe cash shortages. Jim was convicted on all 24 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Jessica Hahn's story had reached the Charlotte Observer much earlier. In December 1984, she called reporter Charles Shepard and described what happened in 1980. She talked about meetings with Richard Dortch in late 1984, where she said she had been pressured to sign a document taking back her accusations. The newspaper held the story for years. Editors wanted proof that donated money had been used to silence her. In early 1987, when they confirmed the hush payment, they finally moved forward. Their reporting cracked open a massive fraud far beyond the original scandal. The hush money arrangement itself was chilling. Jessica accused Bakker of rape, assault, and kidnapping. Dortch told Bakker, and Bakker said he had not raped anyone, but admitted there was a problem. The payment reached $265,000 split into cash and a trust fund. Jessica would receive interest for 2 decades and then the full amount if she stayed quiet. After Bakker resigned, PTL stopped paying the interest. Her agent said he would do everything possible to force PTL to honor the agreement. When Dortch told Bakker how much the settlement cost, Bakker screamed that he did not want to know, but Dortch told him he had to know. On March 19, 1987, Jim Bakker released a statement admitting to a sexual encounter with Jessica Hahn in 1980 and resigned from PTL. On March 23, he claimed he stepped down to save PTL from a hostile plot, believing Jerry Falwell would guide the ministry temporarily until he returned. That dream died quickly. On April 28, only 39 days later, Falwell permanently banned him from returning. In just 6 weeks, Bakker went from running a $172,000 empire to being locked out of everything. Falwell soon discovered chaos far worse than expected. PTL owed about $72,000. Roe Messner alone was owed $14,000. Court filings later claimed Messner had submitted $5,300,000 in inflated or fake invoices. Bakker had transferred his $148,000 Gatlinburg chalet to Messner 3 weeks before resigning, trying to cover $300,000 in personal debt. Falwell begged supporters to pray for $10,000 by the end of May. PTL workers even attempted to retrieve ministry property from the Gatlinburg home, but Messner stopped them with a restraining order. In May 1987, PTL auctioned off symbols of the Bakkers' lifestyle. The air-conditioned doghouse drew the most attention. The auction included the 7-foot bronze giraffe, gold-plated fixtures, multiple Rolls-Royces, a 1985 Lincoln Continental, a 1927 Franklin, silver pianos, and antiques. Bidders hoped to raise $500,000 to reduce the debt. The partnership fraud unfolded in even darker detail. From 1984 to 1987, Bakker urged believers to buy $1,000 lifetime partnerships for Heritage USA. He said he would sell only $25,000 to protect their access to rooms. In truth, he sold 683 Grand Hotel partnerships and about $153,000 across all programs. PTL raised $158,000. Only the Grand Hotel and one bunkhouse were built. The Towers Hotel ate $74,000 and never opened. Less than 20 cents of each dollar went to construction. The rest vanished into mismanagement and luxury. The jury reached its verdict on October 5, 1989. After 10 hours of deliberation, they found Bakker guilty on all 24 counts. On fort, seat for Tunturin. Jurors said he contradicted witness after witness. One juror said none of them believed his testimony. Judge Robert Potter sentenced Bakker on October 24, 1989. He gave him 45 years in prison and a $500,000 fine. The judge said people were tired of being saps for money-hungry preachers. Prosecutors called Bakker one of the biggest con men they had ever seen. Potter refused bail and compared Bakker's followers to those of Jim Jones, saying they believed he could walk on water. That comment later helped overturn the sentence because it showed deep bias. Bakker suffered a mental collapse during the trial. His psychiatrist found him curled in a fetal position under a couch, hallucinating. He believed people outside had turned into terrifying creatures. The judge halted the trial and sent him to Butner for evaluation, then transferred him to Rochester, Minnesota, where the federal system kept its sickest inmates. He eventually joined the regular population there. In 1991, the appeals court threw out his 45-year sentence. In August 1991, a new judge listened to Bakker's apology and reduced the sentence to 18 years. Tammy Faye cried in the courtroom. Bakker did not. He became eligible for parole in 4 years. He was released in July 1994 after serving only 412 years. He moved to a halfway house and then walked free on December 1st. The scandal had shaken American faith in televangelists for years. He returned to television in 2003. Tammy Faye officially ended their 31-year marriage on March 13, 1992. She said she had pretended to be fine for too long. Jim signed the divorce papers from prison, unable to fight the decision. She received custody of their teenage son and no alimony. After his release, Bakker stayed at a farmhouse owned by Ruth Graham, who insisted he had a place there. He worked with the homeless in Los Angeles and said he never planned to return to preaching, but he slowly stepped back into ministry through the Dream Center. In July 1998, he met Lori Beth Graham in an alley behind a Los Angeles church. She remembered him from the famous handcuff photo taken in 1989. They married on September 4, 1998, after knowing each other only 50 days. 4 pastors performed the ceremony. Jim said he fell in love with her heart before anything else. In 2003, he launched the new Jim Bakker Show near Branson, Missouri. He preached about the end times and sold buckets of survival food. A 154-meal sampler cost $135. Larger kits reached $4,500. He created the PTL network again, calling it Prophets Talking Loud, and made long speeches about the coming rapture. In early 2020, at age 80, he began selling a product called Silver Solution, claiming it could cure COVID-19 in 12 hours. Attorneys general from Missouri and New York shut him down. The FDA warned him. He removed the product from his site and later paid $156,000 in restitution. By May and June 2025, he was begging viewers to raise $1,000 or he would lose everything. He asked for 1,000 people to send $1,000 each. He warned he might end up on the street. His co-hosts said the financial trouble began in 2020. In January 2026, he suffered a stroke. His wife, Lori, said he had been under intense spiritual and legal attacks. She said he was already hearing from the Lord and preparing a message for when he returned. Back in 2021, during a show, he said his 1989 conviction was an example of cancel culture. He claimed the government edited his footage to make him say things he never said. None of that was true. The jury convicted him on all 24 counts because the evidence was overwhelming. He sold more than 160,000 partnerships he could never honor, diverted millions, built an air-conditioned doghouse, and lived a life funded by believers who trusted him. Even when partners won a $129,700 civil suit, they never recovered their money. The story kept unfolding for decades, each chapter revealing how far he had fallen and how long the consequences stretched into the lives of the people who believed in him.